You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it. So listen to Edward Snowden on Bitcoin. Thanks for watching.
Is free money, right? And I don't mean that like the price is rising.
This is the first decentralized digital alternative currency or asset that we've ever seen grow to this size.
We live our lives in a way that we can experiment, we can engage, we can try things, we can even fail.
The government is collecting information about who we're calling.
That phone in your pocket right now might be a government spying device.
Government prosecutors were able to get cell phone records.
Without privacy, we have no power, because it's privacy that gives us agency. It's privacy, that right to the self, that allows us to come up with that original idea.
In this video, Edward Snowden speaks on Bitcoin and privacy and the relationship they have to one another. For a guy that is still actively wanted by the United States government, Edward Snowden knows a thing or two about privacy. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video where we go over one piece of recent Bitcoin data that suggests where the Bitcoin price is likely to go from here. Also, only a tiny percentage of my viewers are actually subscribed. If you enjoy the video, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the video.
This is what I think for me is the most interesting point about Bitcoin. And I've said this before. Bitcoin is free money, right? And I don't mean that like the price is rising. Really, I don't mean that like the price is rising. This is not financial advice. You guys have heard it. Things are going up really parabolic right now. But what I mean is it's the first free money, right? You are able to exchange and interact permissionlessly. And when I think about privacy, when I think about liberty, that's what this is all about. What does liberty mean? It's freedom from permission. It means we live our lives in a way that we can experiment, we can engage, we can try things, we can even fail. And we don't have to get, a permission slip from the principal's office. We're not watched, we're not recorded. And because of this, our mistakes don't haunt us. And this core point, right? This ability to act without permission, so long as you're not harming someone else, so long as you're not infringing on the rights of others, this is the foundation of all rights. When you talk about due process, when you talk about freedom of speech, when you talk about freedom of religion, whatever you have, right? The right to a fair trial, the reason we have these rights, what they are recognizing, what they're codifying, is a right to the self, right? And this goes in our language all the way down to private property, right? Privacy is that thing that says you belong to you rather than to society. And what I fear is that over the last decades, as technology has changed the world in ways that make monitoring people and peoples at scale, right? Populations seeing everything that's going on in new ways and deeper ways, right? It used to be if governments wanted to watch us, they had to put teams of men on the street to follow you around, working in buildings, in cars, out on foot, to see where you go, to see who you meet, how you got there, how long you were there, to sit close enough into the cafe to know generally what your activities were, but not so close that you go, who is this guy that's sitting behind me all the time, right? Now, all of this happens with devices that we ourselves paid for, right? Whether it's your home internet connection, whether it's the phone that's in your pocket right now, we are padding out a permanent record of every private life. And once we do that, privacy stops being the status quo, right? Liberty stops being the natural state of things. And now it's a point in tension with the systems of the day. And what does that actually boil down to, right? What does that actually mean? I mean, privacy has always been the natural state of human existence. Because even if you lived back in an old village in the day, people would gossip about you, people would understand you, people would see kind of how you go, how you live. But it was very easy to get away from this. You know, you walked out in the woods, you were alone. You closed your doors and there was no one but you. Unless they came in and ransacked your journals, these things belong to you. But now that there is a record of everything being created, of every message you've ever sent, every border you've ever crossed, everything you've ever bought, every conversation you've ever had, everything you've ever typed into that search box, right? Instead, the only real control we have over the measure of privacy, over the measure of liberty in our lives, in our countries, in our world today, is that governments and institutions, meaning both governmental and corporate, decide to grant us. Because what we really have now is a record of all of our lives that the telecommunications companies have, that Facebook has, that the government has, that Visa and MasterCard have, right? And simply their willingness or their agreement with us that they will not read it, except where the law permits it, except when they choose to break that, and when it's simply too expensive and too difficult. But the whole thing about too expensive, too difficult, just over the span of my life, just over the span of the last few years, we've all seen that difficulty dropping and dropping and dropping. And as we get better deep learning, machine learning, and artificial intelligence methods of sorting through big data, eventually it's going to be cheap, it's going to be easy, it's going to happen on the fly. And so what then, right? So when you ask, why does privacy matter, right? And we scope back from all of this of what's happening now and how does it work, into what it means. Surveillance, you know, everybody thinks about 2013 and why I came forward, and they think surveillance, surveillance, surveillance. 2013 wasn't about surveillance. Surveillance was the mechanism used to discuss a conversation that was affecting all of us, which is that our governments, even in what we like to believe are free and open societies, are becoming increasingly comfortable making decisions without involving the democratic process, right? We weren't asked if we wanted to vote in favor of mass surveillance, right? They simply didn't, right? We weren't asked. The courts weren't even allowed to consider if these systems were constitutional. Every time someone got evidence that they were spied on with these, and this has been happening back to 2004, right before 2013 came forward, there were indications that this system had been built and that it was operating unlawfully. And we got some of the biggest NGOs in the United States who challenged it. We got the American Civil Liberties Union, who challenged this in court. They were representing Amnesty International, right? And when it got all the way up to the Supreme Court, right, they said, look, this is a really interesting controversy, and this is something that we should be able to weigh in on. But the government, and by this they mean the executive branch, is saying this is a secret. And because it's a secret, the courts don't have the place to decide this, because it's not for the courts to decide what is or is not secret. It's up to the courts to decide what is or is not lawful. The champion of secrets, right, the master of the keys, that's the executive branch. And they say it's secret, so we have to trust them. But that puts society in a position where we have to trust the executive. And if we don't know what the executive is doing, we don't know how to vote. And if we can't vote in a meaningful, informed way, we can't grant consent in a meaningful way. Which means even though we have a democracy in name, it's not truly meaningful. And I know this is a long ramble and it's not really what you asked for, but
this is beautiful.
This is where we get back to that key point of why privacy matters. Is without privacy, we have no power. Because it's privacy that gives us agency. It's privacy, that right to the self, that allows us to come up with that original idea. That could be a bad idea, that could be one we're criticized for, that could get, you know, us disowned by our friends or our community or society, right? But then once we have that idea, we can share it with people that we do trust and go, is this a good idea? What do you think about this? And they can sharpen that idea, they can challenge us, they can argue with us, and then we share it again, and we share it again, and step by step it goes more broadly out into the world. And once it's gone these extra steps, right? Suddenly you no longer have a person talking about this. You no longer have a table talking about this. You have a city talking about it, and then you have a country talking about it, and then you have the whole world talking about it. And that is the origin of progress. Without privacy, we don't have progress. Without privacy, we don't have any meaning in the rest of our rights. Because what is a right? A right exists to protect, not the majority, because the majority decides what is or is not lawful. The majority doesn't need rights. The majority hardly needs laws. Rights exist to protect the minority against the majority. And there is no more vulnerable minority than the minority of one.
So there's Edward Snowden on the relationship between Bitcoin and privacy.